Hi, my name is Roland and welcome to my VectrexRoli show. This year I wanted to show you for a long time. Today we will have a closer look at Nintendo's Game & Watch series, and most of you interested in 1980s electronic handheld gaming will definitely like the Nintendo Game & Watch series. Some quick facts at the beginning: they were invented by Gunpei Yokoi, the same gentleman that invented the Game Boy, Virtual Boy and a lot of other great toys for Nintendo. The first Game & Watch game was released in 1980, and many ideas and concepts that came up for the Game & Watch games were also reused later for other Nintendo products, like for example the cross D-pad design you could find also later on Nintendo controllers and handheld gaming systems. And also the concept of having two screens for a handheld gaming system was reused on the Nintendo DS and 3DS. There were 59 different Game & Watch games produced and one that was only available as a contest prize, and over the years different series were designed, like the Silver and Gold series, widescreen, multi-screen, tabletop, panorama, supercolor, microverse system and crystal screen. So as you can see from that list, Nintendo invested a lot of development work and thoughts into these products. If you want to know more facts, just look it up on Wikipedia and tons of other great web pages, as I don't want to produce some kind of boring history lesson educational video here. I don't own many original Game & Watch games, I only got a few, and most of them were kind donations from colleagues and friends, so most are just loose without box or manual. I will not show detailed gameplay for all of them now, I will only focus on 3 examples, as this video would get too long then. So this is some kind of introduction video, and I might show more games in future videos. I would like to start with a retro Game & Watch game with the title Ball. So what you see here is a clubbed Nintendo release from 2010 to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Game & Watch. The reason why I want to show you that is because this is a reproduction of the first Game & Watch game ever released in 1980, and even I don't own that original release, we can have a look how that game looked like on this repro here. Gameplay wise it is pretty close to the original game from what I can tell. There are some differences like box design, and you can mute the sound on this new repro version. There is a different battery type used, and there is also a screw on the battery cover, which the original game didn't have. This is the version from Japanese Club Nintendo. It was also released as an US version. I had to buy this via eBay, as there never was a real Club Nintendo here in my country, and when they finally announced it here, they closed down whole Club Nintendo shortly after. Well, thank you very much for that, Nintendo. There is only a left and right button to control the game. Most Game & Watch games also had buttons labeled Game A and Game B, and in most cases Game B is a faster and more difficult version, but this is not the case with all games. As the product name Game & Watch implies, that device is not only a toy but also a clock, so it gave parents the good feeling they did buy something useful for their kids. The games were marketed under different brand names worldwide. For example, here in Austria they were called Tricotronic back then. Let's see a bit of gameplay for Game A here. This game has very simple gameplay mechanics. Later titles were more complex and also graphics were a bit more interesting, and I would say they also were more fun than this first title here. Even this one is not that bad in my opinion. In that game you toss balls in the air and you must catch them and toss them up again. You only get one single life. What I always liked with those Game & Watch games is that Nintendo didn't try to let the game characters look super cute like in later Mario titles, so those LCD games were also more appealing to an older audience, and I remember back in the 1980s my friends had such games and their whole family was playing them. I didn't own a Game & Watch back in the days, as I already had a real home computer with color graphics, so back then I thought that those kind of games were too primitive. But I also remembered that when I visited my friends and tried the original Nintendo Game & Watch games, I was impressed by the whole gameplay, how fun and addictive it was, and how the games got faster and more challenging over time. I once saw a video from a younger YouTuber about the Nintendo e-reader for the Gameboy Advance. Just in case you don't know what it is, go and watch my video about that, as this is quite an interesting add-on. Anyway, that younger guy showed one e-reader game, which was basically the Game & Watch game Manhole, simulated on the Gameboy Advance, and he said then something like, "This is not the best game, but Nintendo had to start somehow." You know, I was not really sure if he fully understood that this game was originally a LCD game and that there were certain limitations with those LCD games. Later games also had additional color screen overlays to let the games look more interesting, and we will see that on the next game. This game is a true classic. This is Donkey Kong, model number DK52 from 1982. This here is now a real classic Game & Watch and not just a modern repro. Those games look and feel great, so this is a quality product and still working today. This game is from the multi-screen series and it looks a bit like a modern DS or 3DS handheld system with the two screens, and it also has already a D-pad to control the game. Most of you will know the classic arcade game Donkey Kong, and this is basically a reduced and slightly changed version of that game. On the screen you can see the color screen overlay I mentioned before, and it makes the game look colorful and interesting. The game characters look frantic and panicky, and I really like that. No super cute looking Nintendo characters here. You get the usual beeping sounds when playing the game, and again there are Game A and Game B buttons. The game stores even the high scores. Most classic Game & Watch games work with 2 button cell batteries, and they even came with batteries back in the days. And those games are low power devices similar to LCD watches or LCD calculators. The LCD does not need much energy and there is no backlight for the screen. Most games use 2 different sizes of batteries. They are called LR or SR43 and LR or SR44, so always check on the back which battery type is required, otherwise you either have contact issues or you even can break the battery cover. Be careful when using cheap no-name batteries, they often tend to leak after a short period of time, so maybe it is better to invest $1 or $2 more for batteries you really would like to use in valuable collector's items. When you put in new batteries or press the reset button, which is labeled ACL, you see all the sprites and objects on the LCD screen, which is quite helpful to see if the screen is still working, and this is also the case with many other LCD games from other companies, so when you go to flea markets it makes sense always to bring a set of batteries with you to test the devices before you buy them. This is such a great game, really love it. This is one of the more common games and you still can find it for a reasonable amount of money, at least if you are not looking only on eBay or for complete boxed versions. As I have to watch the game through a field monitor connected to my camera, it is not easy to play that game while filming, but now it is more important for me that you can see the screen of the game. This is one of the games I can definitely recommend to get. In the 1980s many handheld games came to the market, also made by other companies than Nintendo. Some were LCD based, similar to the Game & Watch product line, some had LED or VFD screens, but most of the Nintendo games were top notch when it comes to quality of the hardware and also quality of the gameplay mechanics. As I just mentioned different screen technologies, you know, often people on YouTube mix up those technologies and they often talk about LCD games, even it is a VFD color screen. Anyway, if you want to see more handheld games, game watches and tabletop games, even also based on electromechanical technology instead of electronics, go and check out my YouTube playlist called Handheld and Tabletop Games, and I will link to that. There is some interesting stuff to see. If you are a Nintendo fan, you might be also interested in the Starfox Game watch I will show you there. Before we will have a closer look at another Game & Watch game, I would like to mention that a few younger gamers and younger collectors think that all LCD games were crap and had bad gameplay mechanics, and the main reason why they think that is because they only have seen cheap LCD games like, for example, from Tiger Electronics from the 1990s so far, with either boring or confusing gameplay mechanics, or they might have seen tiny cheap LCD games they got with their McDonald's meals after the year 2000. So good old Ronald McDonald, the evil clown, does not only make something he calls food out of plastic, but also LCD games, and the children that work in the Chinese slave factory that built the games, they even got less money for the work than people working at McDonald's. Made by children for children with love. I'm loving it. Anyway, don't get me wrong, of course you can also have some fun with those cheaper new LCD games for sure, and I also collect them if I get them cheap, but trust me, you cannot compare the quality of those LCD games with the old classic Nintendo Game & Watch titles. Even LCD technology was extremely limited, most of the gameplay mechanics did age well, and if you like modern mini-games on mobile phones, chances are you will also like original Nintendo Game & Watch games. This game here is now the last classic one I will show you today in more detail, as this video here is already quite long. What we have here is DJ 101 from 1982. This is Donkey Kong Jr. There were two Game & Watch versions made. What we see here is the black and white version for the so-called new widescreen series, and there was even a nice tabletop color version, which I don't have unfortunately. I got even a box with the game. The numbers on the box flaps and on the back of the game don't match. As far as I know, with Game & Watch games it is not like with classic Game Boy models that on the box and game were always the same serial numbers, but I'm not really a Game & Watch expert, so please feel free to comment on that in case you know more. On the box we see the character that became Mario later, and while nowadays Nintendo wants us to believe that Mario is a friendly character that is always willing to help a princess, back in the 1980s kids were still strong enough to handle the reality. Just look at him, he's pissed and he's a drunken bastard, and his wife or girlfriend is not a princess of course, she's just a cheating bitch, and when she tells us she got kidnapped, she was visiting her lover of course, and that guy that is called Mario today would beat them both up whenever he could find them. Yes, those were the 1980s, brutal but totally honest. And if you say now, Roland, come on, you were just making this all up. No, seriously, just look at him, he's even harassing animals with a whip. And also think about it, why would Nintendo need a special partnership program for YouTubers today if they don't have to hide something? Beside the fact that you have to be not the smartest person on this planet if you really watch reviews from a Nintendo partner channel when you know they only get money if they praise the products they are reviewing. But anyway, I digress. Let's go back to the times when Nintendo still was a proper company. The games came with manuals, and I don't have that for this game now, but you can find web pages where you can download scans if you want. On the back of the game we see the stand, and you can use the whole game as a nice looking clock you can put on a shelf or desk, and you also get then some nice looking demo gameplay on the screen. This is a nice feature in my opinion, and this is something you cannot do today with a 3DS for example, as it would need too much power. When collectors buy Game & Watches, they often look if the serial number is still on, if the stand is there in case the game had one, and if the battery cover is still there. You can buy new replacement covers nowadays, but maybe the colors might not be 100% the same in some cases I guess. As those games are already quite old today, on some games you can see minor issues. Sometimes the battery contacts got loose, which is easy to fix as long as you know how to use a soldering iron. And sometimes the buttons have contact issues and you simply can clean the contacts on the PCB with alcohol, so that is also quite easy to fix. Again, let's see now some random gameplay footage in Game A mode. So you are Donkey Kong Jr. and you have to help your father who was locked up, and you have to bring keys to unlock 4 parts of the cage door. You have to avoid birds and something they call snapjaws in the manual. You have to jump and climb. This is such an addictive and fun title, and I definitely can recommend to get this one here. In my personal opinion, this is one of the best Game & Watch titles ever made. I would also like to mention that there are Game & Watch clones available from Eastern European or former Soviet Union countries, also quite interesting to see, and you get them on eBay. Some sellers still are sitting on tons of new old stock, but don't pay the insane asking prices you sometimes see on eBay. Those games are definitely not the same quality as original Nintendo games, so I would recommend buying them only if you find them very cheap. I cannot tell you more about it here now, as this video would get too long then, so this could be a topic for a future video. For now, enough with old classic Game & Watch games. If you're interested in such games but you don't find them for a reasonable amount of money, I would like to show you some alternatives now at the end of this video. I did mention this webpage already in one of my videos and want to mention it again. If you have a Windows PC, go and check out the MADrigal handheld simulator page. Not all of them are Nintendo games, so you get even more other stuff, and those simulators are really amazing. And the best thing is, they are for free, so what are you waiting for? Go and download the whole MADrigal CD collection with all simulators currently available on the page. Believe me, you will have a lot of retro fun with that, and if you are around my age, you will remember a lot of games you will find there. Maybe you will say, Roland, free simulators are great, but I would like to get a real Game & Watch, but without paying insane eBay prices, of course. Well, then I will show you something else here. Those are the so-called Nintendo Mini Classics. The first ones came out around 1998, but you can still buy some of them today. They look like tiny classic Game Boys with D-pad controls. Most games are reissues of Game & Watch titles, but there are some titles that were not from the original Game & Watch series, like Soccer, Carrera Racing, Tetris and many others, for example, but they are not that great compared to classic Game & Watch games, at least in my opinion. You get games with single or multi-screen, a keychain is attached but can be removed, there is an alarm clock feature, and those games are sold worldwide under several different brand names. There are also different other keychain mini Game & Watch games available, which show some game animation on the screen, but you cannot really play a game on them, so don't mix them up with the Nintendo Mini Classics you see here. Many titles have been re-released over and over again, so the look of the blister package, color of the game and also the colors used on the screen changed over time. From what I understand, you don't really get 100% the same game logic as on the original games, so some might sound and behave slightly differently, but the games I played so far were close to the original classic games. I cannot remember seeing much differences. Don't expect the same hardware quality though, the buttons on the mini classics feel cheaper for example. A few months ago, end of 2015, I bought some titles like the excellent Mario Cement Factory, Donkey Kong Jr. and some other titles for less than €5 here in Austria. If you still can find them also in your country, I can recommend getting those two titles. They are fun and addictive, and also if you're looking for a small gift for another retro gaming fan, they are perfect for that. But I personally would not really pay more than, let's say, 10 to 12 euros for that, so the €5 I paid were quite okay, I would say. Of course, as always, there are some resellers on eBay trying to charge 50 to 80 euros for those cheap games, and they might be even successful with that, you know. People that also trust in reviews from paid Nintendo propaganda channels also might have eBay accounts to buy such overpriced items. Anyway, those mini classics might be worth a whole separate video. There were also Game & Watch games for the different Game Boy models available. The most obscure way to play a Game & Watch game on your Game Boy Advance would be using the Nintendo e-reader add-on I did already mention. Check out my video to see that, but even several Game & Watch titles were originally planned, only one single game was released for the e-reader. You could also get one of the nice Game & Watch gallery versions for your Game Boy with simulations of old classic games, but you can also always play new versions with more modern looking Game Boy graphics. I really like those Game Boy games, even the classic Game & Watch multi-screen games don't work that great on the single screen Game Boy. Besides download versions for the Nintendo DSi and 3DS, there were also two Nintendo DS cards available from Club Nintendo, which were called the Game & Watch Collection Series. You still can find them on eBay, and they work both on DS and 3DS consoles. There you can play only the classic versions, so it is nothing like the Game & Watch Gallery series on the Game Boy, but the simulation works great and is well implemented. So I hope that was interesting and entertaining for you. Let me know in the comments if you want to see more. If you don't want to wait, also go and check out the great handheld and tabletop collection of a fellow Austrian YouTuber, Garion79, also known under the name Retro Gambler. He does all his videos both in English and German language. I will link to 3 of his English videos in the description text below, and it is really worth watching that. Please like, share and subscribe. Say hello to us also on Facebook and feel free to leave a comment. Thanks for watching.